I love CRPGs. Sometimes I just can't be bothered to sweat my way through a multiplayer match or watch cutscenes that last longer than the amount of time that I last in bed, which is a joke. Of course, I don't get laid. Sometimes you just want to sit back and delve into a world rich with dialogue, lore, and elaborate game mechanics. Are they graphically impressive with motion captured cutscenes done by world famous actors? No, but CRPGs often go on sale for like the same price as a hot dog and a Red Bull. And on top of that, you can easily get dozens if not hundreds of hours out of them. One of the more famous CRPGs that has released in recent history is Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. A game that has been on my wish list for ages, but truth be told, just intimidated the crap out of me. Nonetheless, I gave it a shot and I came to the conclusion that I absolutely love this game. But I also fucking hate everything about it. And I'm gonna show you why. The start of Wrath of the Righteous is captivating enough, with you and your freshly made, customizable character entering the city of Canabras, being wounded, getting stitched back together, and within seconds after that being attacked by demons of the abyss. This automatically brings me to already the most intimidating part of the game, which is creating said character. You see, I consider myself a vivid RPG player, but whenever I say that, I mean the casual RPGs, or in other words, even games like Dragon Age and The Witcher intimidated the shit out of me the first time I played them. I had no clue what was going on. However, deciding which pants and torso gear combination suits Geralt better is a lot less complex than this. The most used button combination I've used during my playthroughs were Shift and Alt, as I constantly was backing out of the game looking up guides, tutorials on YouTube and Reddit. Now then, can you technically learn everything there is to be learned from the in-game tutorials and by trial and error? Yes. Will you though? No. I can guarantee you that veterans of this game will call me an idiot, and they have every right to do so, as I am. But the moment fights like these occur, you will have absolutely no clue what in the flying fuck is going on. Like, yeah, if things are invisible, it makes sense to use spells or buffs that make your party see invisible shit. Or if things are on fire, throw some ice at it. Sure, but that's about the end of my knowledge. AC, CMD, dexterity, reflex saves, will saves, fortune saves, concentration fails, spell fails, my entire life fails. It's a lot. Sometimes enemies just won't die, even on minus 10k hit points, but after inspecting them, you'll see that they auto-regenerate health, unless they're hit with certain weapon types, meaning that next to inspecting enemies for their abilities and buffs, you also have to spot their immunities and weaknesses. Nonetheless, it sometimes kind of feels like tactics don't really matter all too much in Wrath of the Righteous. Even if you have a very fleshed out and diverse party, you can still get hard countered if an enemy has a certain ability you don't have an answer to, which isn't that rare, as there are like a bajillion different abilities, debuffs and spells in the entire game. Or if you simply just don't have the weapon that counters their regeneration. On top of that, the game obviously lets combat be decided by dice rolls. The higher the difficulty you choose, the more difficult the dice rolls become. A lot of games do this though. Instead of trying to create a more advanced AI, they just make enemies stronger and make your characters or the mechanics you use weaker, resulting in very long and tedious fights that aren't very fun. The thing is though, in classic CRPG fashion, the problem isn't just the fights being long, but more so the preparation for every fight. You will quickly realize that half of the combat is you just pre-buffing your party before heading into certain fights. There's a reason the second most downloaded mod for this game is a mod that makes pre-buffing your characters easier and less time consuming. In case you need more perspective, the game has sold over 1 million copies, which is great. Yet this mod has been downloaded more than 100,000 times. So if every 1 to like 10 people download a mod to make one of your game mechanics less tedious, it's pretty tedious. Okay. Nonetheless, when the actual fighting starts, this is where the game shines, most of the time. You see, getting your ass kicked in a fight sucks, but figuring out why it's happening is like half of the fun. Inspecting opponents and trying to counter their strengths with your abilities is where all of the magic is to be found. And it truly does feel rewarding to go from dying within 30 seconds to completely walking over opponents within a couple of tries. But there are still just going to be a lot of moments where you are stomping everything you see, only to cut a corner and suddenly turn into an enemy with such insane stats you'll feel like you've missed an entire chapter of the game. Thankfully though, after much trial and error, I've managed to create my own personal tactic that works great for very tough fights. I must warn you though that it's very elaborate and complex. I call it the retreat into a corner and press hold tactic. Whenever you found yourself getting overwhelmed or just simply butt-fucked by an enemy with an AC higher than your IQ, just run away and let them come to you. It works great. May not work on any difficulty higher than core, but whoever plays on those. Nerds. Okay, let's talk about items, just loot in general. No, not Not that type of loot. This type of loot. Which there is a lot of. Some might even say too much. Potions, scrolls, ingredients, weapons, rings, necklaces, shoes, bracers, books. If you're playing on the hardest difficulty, pausing the game every 4 seconds, you're most likely gonna use all of this stuff. If you're on core and anything below that, you are not gonna touch 90% of it. Bonus points for being able to take a second look at all of the gear you've forgotten when you're leaving an area though. And there are plenty of merchants spread out through the game who can buy all of your junk, but nonetheless, there's just too much shit that you will just never use. RPGs in general are highly dependent on NPCs and companions, but CRPGs even more so, as you're gonna spend like 80% of the game on like this top view looking at their text boxes. Let's do a mini tier list, because why not? Social and his brother. They're alright, not too interesting, but at least the companion quest was pretty cool and tied in with the main story. They're somewhere in the middle. Darren. Complete jackass, but really funny and charismatic. His companion quest is also really great, and he actually somehow has a lot of character development throughout the story, especially if you romance him. He's S tier. Lan and When to Walk. They both start off kinda bland, but to be fair, they do unfold a lot throughout the story. They both have some pretty unique romances to say the least, but if you don't like Lan's pragmatic viewpoints and When to Walk's straight up terrorism, you probably won't like him. Still, I'd say that Lan is A tier and When to Walk is slightly below him at B tier. Camellia. No clue what the hype is about. Terrible character. She's very boring for the first 3 chapters, and then when her secret is revealed, let's face her, the only reason you keep her around is because at that point you've built her into a pretty strong character. Every sane person would either lock her up or try to kill her. She's insane. Also, fuck the person who thought it was a good idea to make her say this line every time she unlocks a door or disarms a trap.
I am helpful, am I not? I am helpful, am I not? I am helpful, am I not?
D tier. Arushale. Great character, lots of decisions to make with her, the romance also great. S tier. Greybore. More like grey boring. Just adds nothing whatsoever, and he has an IQ the equivalent of a goldfish because he decides to attack your entire party on his own. F tier. Woljev. Selfish, cocky, little dipshit. A tier. But his voice actor is so good, I'm gonna bump that up to like S tier. Ember. Ember is amazing. She will throw lines your way like, you know we will eventually all dissolve and be eaten by maggots and forgotten, right? And then when you're like, what the fuck? She's like, oh, hee, don't mind me, I'm just a simple little girl.
Magpie baked a bad pie, dropped it flat, made the sky cry, dropped the second, made the rivers dry, dropped the third, now we all die.
A tier. No, S tier. Regal. You know what you'll get. Zero surprises coming out of him. He's just very pragmatic and straightforward. B tier at best. Also, at least when he attacks you, he decides to do it with allies. And because you've been acting like a complete maniac, which is fair. Sela. S tier. Great companion quest, lots of character development. She's with you from the start. She sticks to her views, but also gives you advice when need be. She's compassionate, just great. Nenio. Terrible. Absolute headache of a character. Zero character development, just not funny, fucking annoying. Every bit of dialogue is about the exact same topic. The only redeeming quality she has is that she makes you feel like a side character in your own story, which is a pretty unique experience, but that on its own is not enough to redeem her absolute dog shit character. Still, for the fact alone that she managed to piss me off that much, I'm gonna put it at D tier. So yeah, I'm happy to announce that the companions in Wrath of the Righteous are great-ish.
Can't leave your head unprotected.
Just as long as it doesn't have a visor. Or how else am I meant to scare the enemy?
The companion quests have been spread out pretty well, with some of them starting in Act 2 or 3 and only ending when you near the endgame yourself. I also like how some of them can actually die due to their own decisions or mistakes, instead of just by your doing. It makes it feel like they're actual people. Something that should also be noted about the companions, or actually their dialogue, is that they've been written in a way that ensures you can still remain quote-unquote yourself while talking to them. Another game that did this flawlessly was Dragon Age Origins, meaning you could say romance a character, but still constantly fight with them or joke about them.
Yes. No. I do. And yet, I cannot.
On my first run, I romanced Darren, and even as the story unfolded and was nearing its end, I could still tease him and be like, yeah, honestly, I don't even give a fuck about you. And he was like, yeah, fair. Instead of having everything turn into some mushy, feel-good bullshit. But yeah, this is some great roleplaying. Speaking of roleplaying... Misschien had ik hier moeten beginnen, gezien het een RPG is. The two game mechanics that will primarily determine what type of character you'll be are the moral choices and the mythic paths. The mythic paths are great, as picking a different option every playthrough will completely change the route of the story, seeing as you can go from being a dragon to getting a dragon, from being a demon or an angel to a walking swarm of insects. That's sick. The moral compass leaves a bit to be desired though. If I, for example, play as a chaotic character, some of the choices I have to make will indeed be aligned with the chaotic path, but unfortunately will also just be really fucking weird. Things like letting prisoners go without a reason or recruiting underage children into my ranks are pretty dumb and just crazy. But, to be fair, sure, also really chaotic. Not only choosing different mythic paths and alignments will alter the game, but also these things. I don't know what to call them. Text boxes, skill checks, text-based skill checks. In which you can change the way you maneuver your army, go exploring with your party, or try to uncover mysteries. On top of that, the stories and the characters are both very engaging. The dialogue ranges from funny to sad and from serious to absolutely deranged. With that being said though, every playthrough has the same issue for me. But the video is almost over and I have kept every type of spoiler to a bare minimum or essentially non-existent. So from this point on, I am gonna be spoiling some things. I'm not necessarily gonna spoil the story, but more so an area of the story. People who have already played this game will probably already know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't and you want to go into this game completely fresh and you want to know nothing about it before you get into it yourself, then why in the fuck are you watching a review? Some spoilers, so shoot. From the moment Canabres gets attacked to the moment you have to retake Dresden, I am interested in the story, and the way everything is unfolding is great. By the end of Act 3, some of that interest is lost just a little bit, as you are free to go wherever you want, but certain areas are simply way too difficult without there being a way for you to know. So this kinda takes the pace out of everything, but still, everything's fine. But then by the end of Act 4, I have to push myself to wrap everything up. I think the developers took the feedback from kingmaking a bit too literal, as in that game you couldn't rotate the camera. So they decided to compensate for this by making an entire act in which you can only complete the act by constantly rotating the camera. Not only does this become tedious within minutes as the transitions take ages, it also ensures you will often walk past the direction you need to go, only to stumble onto it by accident, rotating the camera around on like the 15th attempt. Luckily, they compensated for this terrible game mechanic by keeping some of the other terrible game mechanics from Kingmaker. You see, a lot of the quests are still time-based, meaning you lose access to them if you take too long. You are at least notified of this beforehand, but you are most likely still gonna miss entire parts of the game just because you decided to take a left somewhere instead of a right. For example, on my first playthrough, I completely missed 2 companions just because I hadn't run into them before the story progressed. And this didn't happen because I rushed the story. No, they just died before I got to the area they were in. And to make matters even worse, this moment got activated by the game itself. Meaning I was just exploring and a random dude came up and he was like, yep, it's time to go to the next part of the story now. And I was like, no, go away. And he was like, nope. You have to come with me. It also happens in other parts of the game, where you're told to save some people, but because you went to one of them before the other just permanently dies with no way to fix it, unless you've chosen the absolute perfect playthrough. I don't mind the last part as much though, as now it at least feels like an actual decision. But all in all, I think that these are terrible game mechanics. Speaking of terrible game mechanics, whenever a developer already beforehand gives you the option to completely turn a game mechanic off, you can already guess at how fun it's going to be. The first time I ever played Wrath of the Righteous, like a year or 2 ago, I gave up after the first chapter because I absolutely hated the Crusader management. So whenever I this time got back into the game, I completely turned Crusader management off and I put it on auto mode, which is somehow even worse, as now you'll be stuck waiting multiple days in a row, fiddling your thumbs, waiting for the AI to finally finish off demon armies that are blocking your way, ensuring you can't reach certain quests whenever you want to. Turning it on, however, isn't much better, as it's just boring? Even on higher difficulties, the fights are incredibly monotone and one-sided. It's more of a nuisance that ruins the flow of the game than the tactical playfield that was supposed to represent. Thankfully though, it's still an RPG, meaning that you have plenty of side quests to waste your precious time on Earth on. Things like organizing a theater show in which you can make your character be reenacted by a cyclops, or uncovering a cult led by some witches. Wrath of the Righteous can be summarized as amazing, but also very annoying. If you're into RPGs, especially CRPGs, and you have no clue what to play next, I still still highly recommend this game. Like, yeah, it's tedious, but also easily worth your time. I have to wrap things up because my cat is destroying my room. Know what you're getting yourself into, because even like guides and the tutorials on YouTube, like the most basic stuff, already take 2 hours. So yeah, it's a very elaborate game. Know what you're getting yourself into. Speaking of getting myself into things, what should I get myself into next? Help me, please, because it's not like I'm running out of ideas, but all of my videos have been all over the place, but they've somehow been doing pretty well. So, hey, let me know, leave a comment, a recommendation, tell me to go fuck myself. It's whatever, just tell me something in the comments, I appreciate it. And yeah, see you next time.